Hey everyone, Andre here, along with Tom to discuss Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne HD Remaster. Whoa, that's a mouthful. So we have the Nintendo Switch version, we've had it for I think a week or so now, and Tom's been playing it as of today, because this preview is a little bit different than we expected. So originally Triss was the one handling this game, but unfortunately their apartment building caught fire and now it's uninhabitable. Don't worry, Triss is fine, they made it out safe and sound along with everyone else there, which, thank God. But obviously, they're a little preoccupied right now with things that matter way more than a game preview. So Tom luckily stepped up, was able to play through the game up to the preview, up to the, I think, roughly 3-hour mark, which is as much as we can cover about it. So what that means is this won't be able to offer like an in-depth comparison to the original game, but will offer you a fresh perspective from someone who's never played the game before, and might be even more insightful in some sense, or in some regards, than what you might find from someone who is familiar with it, because Tom is not blinded by nostalgia or anything of that nature when it comes to Shin Megami Tensei 3.
Correct.
So real quick, I'll offer the overview. The HD remaster of this game, which originally came out back in 2003 on PlayStation 2, offers remastered assets, some new features like difficulty settings, a suspend save option, and also apparently for the first time, voice acting in both English and Japanese, along with apparently an alternate story branch, which I don't know what that means. So those are the new features, but otherwise, as far as I'm aware, it's the same game that you possibly know and love. So Tom, what do you think of it so far, now that you've sunk 3 hours into this thing and you had no expectations going in?
Well, with this game, it's interesting to see what happened. I mean, it turns out it's very much about demons, and it takes place right in Tokyo, so it's interesting for me, having been to Tokyo before, having these locations pop up in it, like Yoyogi Park and Shibuya and Shinjuku. I didn't know if I was going to be interested in this or completely bored, but to me it actually was pretty interesting with the concept of a world that basically ends and is taken over by demons, although in a mini world that is Tokyo. That part, I guess, makes more sense for the game's scope, where the world kind of does an Inception-like effect and wraps around on itself, so think like Halo, but a sphere.
Got it, okay. So yeah, you gave me a heads up when you started playing the game, like 3 hours later, like, alright, I reached the point that I can, up to where we can discuss. I'm like, dang, so you must have played through it in just in one sitting, right? So that must have kept you engaged enough that you didn't feel like you had to take a break or anything.
No, it was not like Balan Wonderworld in that regard.
Poor Balan Wonderworld. So, real quick, before we get into maybe some of the more intricacies of the game, which I assume a lot of people are already familiar with, I'm really curious about how it holds up. Again, as I said, you didn't play the original, so in a sense, you might be more critical of it, because you don't have any of that nostalgia for the original experience, which is almost 20 years ago now. So how did it hold up to you in HD on Switch? Like, did it seem like it's clearly dated? Is it clearly a product of 20 years ago, or does it hold up pretty well?
Found with the character models, those look somewhat updated, and things that might not look updated are cutscenes. They were a bit older still and a bit pixelated, and some of the environments might be a bit sparse, but that's just the way it goes, especially one hospital environment that was just mostly corridors. I found myself easily getting lost and having to refer to the map, like getting turned around the wrong way coming out of doors. But as the main focus is on the characters that are super sharp and crisp, it holds up fairly well, I would say.
And how about the brand new voice acting? Because as I mentioned earlier, you were surprised when I told you, yeah, they added that to this game. Did it stick out to you?
I was wondering, how did this game exist without voice acting? I mean, I was impressed by the amount of it. Not too many things are just text only. So I thought, did they add more? Like, because maybe it was just in cutscenes before, but like, no. So that part is impressive, the amount of it, because there is a lot of voice acting, and I would assume this is a fairly long game.
I believe How Long to Beat had it at 70 hours, I think. Don't quote me on that, but yeah, it does seem like a pretty long one. And so was pretty much everything voiced then? Like, if a character was talking, were they actually saying the words?
Yeah, then there just wasn't lip sync necessarily, because there is English and Japanese. They kind of just flapped their gums a bit to start off, and then stopped doing that. But I believe everything except for some minor things weren't voiced. Like, it wasn't a noticeable, hey, this should be voiced type moment.
Got it. And how is the actual quality of the voice acting itself? Did it sound convincing? Like, is it well done? Or did you find it lacking in any sense so far?
Coming from the era of the game that it is, I didn't expect a ton, but none of it like seems bad. It's just some of it might not be the top-notch quality that could be available, but I would put it at like a pretty good type standards that gets the job done. Also, these people, like, maybe as the game goes on, it could potentially get better as you get to know the characters and understand, like, yeah, this voice makes sense for them.
It is pretty interesting that you went into this with the idea that the voices you were hearing were, recorded 20 years ago, and in an era when it was far less consistent across the board, I would say, as you were suggesting. And yet it didn't fully seem that way, it sounds like, to you. Like, it almost sounds like you may have been a little bit impressed given what you were expecting from the voice acting. Is that right, or am I off base?
I was, like, thinking them to the era, yeah, I would say I'm impressed. Like, normally you'd expect some voice acting, but in a ton of text. I mean, I've been playing Yakuza 0 again recently. There is not a ton of voice acting all the time in that game. Like, there's a lot of text. So yeah, I was impressed.
Now, this is a turn-based RPG, right?
Yeah, it's a turn-based RPG, and there is an option to kind of auto-run through everything, although I was finding that towards the end where all the characters are basically doing the simplest attack, and it's like, well, maybe I wouldn't want this unless it was against a really weak enemy I just wanted to rush through.
Got it. So before we get into, like, maybe the intricacies or, like, how it actually breaks down, just on the top level, like, how did it feel to you overall? Like, does it feel like, Final Fantasy VII Remake just went from a turn-based system to a much more action-focused system. So did it feel out of place with all going back to, like, a turn-based era, or did it feel like it worked just fine?
Felt like it was just fine in this game. I didn't find myself going, oh, I wish this wasn't turn-based or anything like that. It was nice to revisit that type of system. And I would say some of the interesting things in there that this game does is that you can talk to the demons. Like, you don't just have to fight them. One option, especially when they're down to one party member, is to talk to them and try to convince them to join your side. Or maybe they'll talk to you and say, like, well, I don't really want to join you, but I'll just leave now. And it's that kind of extra dynamic instead of just running away from a battle, to have that sort of option in the game. I like it.
That's awesome. So wait, can you talk to any enemy in the game you're fighting then? Or
yeah, as the main character, the main playable character, you can talk to whatever character you want in the game. That I accidentally put the first name last and the last name first, so watch out for that. Don't just skip through that.
And so are you able to have, like, a little chat anytime you want? Or, like, will the enemy be like, no, screw you, I'm going to attack you anyway? Or, like, what happens? Like, if they join your side, are they, like, a party member at that point then for the subsequent battle?
If they do join your party, they are a party member that you can choose or summon to bring into your party whenever you like. You can swap through them. It looks like there's a limited number you can have. You can't just have, like, hundreds and hundreds of them by the looks of it. And it's basically when you're on the main character's turn, you can choose to try to talk to them. Sometimes enemies, when last and maybe in a good point, they will talk to you. They'll take the initiative, and you can choose to be nice to them or continue to beat them up. But with these demons, what's funny is one of them, it asked to, like, basically take some of my essence or beat me up 3 times. Like, whatever, it's only 3 health, I'll keep going with it. And then they decided to join my party. Like, normally at that point you expect them just to be a jerk and say, ha ha ha, I got the upper hand. But not so much of that right now. I'm sure that happens later in the game, though, and gets more tricky. There was a boss, though, that I thought maybe the only way to get past him would be to actually talk to them, but that didn't turn out to be the case. Even when he was visibly weakened, he still was quite bitter and didn't want to speak to me.
And all this, again, is fully voiced, right? Like, all that inner battle dialogue?
Not all of the battle dialogue is voiced, but a lot of the dialogue in the game is.
Okay, so you're fighting demons in this game, but what is the actual overall story? Like, where did these demons come from? Why are you battling them? Why are you talking to them? What's the deal here?
Yeah, this was kind of interesting to get into. It was kind of a quick, dark turn in the game where it's almost like the world, if it's not given a reboot every once in a while, will run out of energy and just end. So for some reason, this hospital is the center point of the world that you're going to, and there's kind of a rich, evil guy there, like, milling around. He wants to kill you, but you're spared, and you're there at the one point where humans aren't killed as the world is rebooted, and the demons kind of run rampant around it after. And at that point, you're given demon abilities in a moment very similar to Resident Evil 4's kind of parasites, in my mind. and from there you can actually start taking place in battles and stuff.
Okay. So when you're not in battle, what's the actual like gameplay entail? Are you like running through towns or like some kind of overworld, I assume?
It takes place in an overworld that it's only a little cursor really going around, going to different environments that you can load into. Then you see your player character. And from there are different floating souls that you talk to, or different characters, and sometimes random battles within those. And the map, though, at first wasn't too interesting when it was before the world changed, but after it's neat where it's just wraps around entirely on the inside of a sphere. That part's kind of neat, even though the just going around as a little cursor isn't quite as interesting, but it's quick, I'll give it that.
When the world's curved like that, are you actually following it around the entire curve, or is it just like a background thing?
It appears so far that it might actually wrap around.
That's cool. All right. Is there anything else happening in the gameplay moment to moment, besides like walking around this world and fighting battles?
Very much just like that part felt like a standard RPG where you're just talking to different people, picking up items, taking the time to refresh your HP and magic powers, stuff like that. Some parts I did find myself turning around, as I mentioned earlier. Fortunately, very quick map to bring up and load and see what rooms you haven't been to or not.
How did it actually feel to play, like just the controls and handling? I mean, it's a JRPG, so I assume you don't need like pinpoint precision with anything or like lightning fast reflexes. But how did it feel fine on in the HD remake?
Yep, felt fine. I was using the Pro Controller. I didn't think there was anything necessarily with the Joy-Cons. Character moves around just fine. Doesn't get caught up on geometry or anything like that. I'd say they did a pretty good job, and nothing stood out as being a hassle.
Okay. And how's the performance? Like, was it smooth from what you noticed? Like any slowdown at all, or?
No slowdown at all. Loading was fairly quick. Maybe thanks to having smaller areas load up from time to time. Like, I was in a dungeon, you kind of get the idea that you're loading in different rooms just to keep that load time down. But as a result, it works fine. Loading happens pretty quickly. It's not a long wait.
So based on your 3 hours so far, did you find the story compelling? Do you think do you see yourself like possibly continuing this in the future, or is this the end of the road now that you've reached the preview portion or ended the preview portion?
I'd be interested to hear more. It's a hard ask for a 70-hour game for me. Maybe you, like other people, that's more obtainable to do, but I was definitely interested in the story. It did hook me in a bit. It's interesting to see what will happen in this world. And I will point out too, there's other things in the battles, like keeping track of what enemies are weak to other ones. Things like your characters will talk to you when they level up, and you can opt not to talk to them.
I'll talk to demons instead.
It's like, no, I don't want to hear from you right now. I don't. And things like your characters, I had one of them, I want to say basically evolve into another one, and you can fuse them together. I wasn't able to fuse them just because apparently my level ability was too low. But it seems like there's a lot of depth and neat, interesting things in there that, are in other games, but I think it brings a unique twist to this one about demons.
Yeah, I can only imagine the mechanics get more involved too, the deeper into the game you get. You're still early into this seemingly epic length RPG.
Yeah.
So, is there anything else that stood out to you about your playtime with the game, or anything else you want to impart to our audience before we wrap it up here?
It definitely reminds me of some different demon animes I've watched where, not every demon is evil. Some of them offer interesting advice or just be interesting characters in the world. I would look forward to the variety of demons and the situations in it.
So far it sounds like, again, you never played the original game for comparison, but it sounds like there's no like major missteps here from what you can tell. Like, it seems like this seems to be a well done update of a game that a lot of people enjoyed nearly 20 years ago to this day, right?
Yeah, it's well done. Like, maybe they could have done a bit more, but what they did really paid off, and I think it's holds up well enough that it's worth checking out in my mind.
Okay, awesome. So there you have it. That's our overall impressions of the first 3 hours of the game or so. So if you're curious to see more, we have a whole gameplay video up as well, showing more of it than what you may have seen in this video, or at least more that you can hear of it. As I said, this preview it didn't go exactly as we expected, so stay tuned for our full review, which will likely be done by Triss. I'm assuming everything is in order at that point. If not, we'll figure something out. So thank you for watching. Make sure to click the subscribe button. Check out the videos on the right for more from GameXplain. And with that, we'll catch you guys all for our next video, which will probably be in a few hours knowing us. So see you guys soon. Bye.